Greetings everyone, welcome to Chess Advance. This game was played in Title Tuesday that was held yesterday. With the white pieces, we have the current top rated player, Magnus Carlsen, 5 times world champion, an absolutely amazing person, and one of the players definitely born for chess. With the black pieces, we have Hikaru Nakamura. I mean, calculating machine, really tactical, very difficult to beat, and I mean, just plays extremely fast as well in all spheres of it. He could have been one of the best players if it wasn't for Magnus. And when these two clash, it's always an insane game to watch out for. So without further ado, let's start with this game here. Magnus starts with d4, knight to f6, bishop to f4. Now we know what Magnus is going for. This is the London system, and Magnus absolutely loves it. Here, just d5, e3, c5, and just c3. Now just going for this knight to c6, bishop to d2, and just e6, knight g to f3, c captures. So we'll have an opposite structure kind of setup here in this knight to h5, now attacking the bishop to e3, and bishop to d6. So knight on the rim seems like a little bit of a bad move, but it all works out here. There's no issues. And here, bishop to d3, knight to f4, and now just finally going for bishop captures. So Magnus has given up with the bishop pair, and Hikaru has actually taken it. He has the bishop pair. Can he push for something more than a draw in this position? He just castles now, but now just comes bishop to d7, and with a move like g3 here, pushing the bishop back with bishop to d6, rook to e1, and castles. I mean, you'd be absolutely fine here. There's no poison in the position, because rook to c1, let's say you play rook to c8, knight to e5, knight captures, d captures, bishop to e7, and now just knight to f3, and you can just jump in there and your position would be absolutely spectacular, and there's no issues in the position. But here, after bishop to d7, we have rook to e1, and now just castles by Hikaru. Magnus goes for queen to e2 and just bishop to c7. So that bishop pair is still active. You have to be a little bit careful if you want to be able to beat Hikaru as well. Magnus knows it. Here, rook a to d1 and just queen to e7, knight to b3, bishop to d6. Knight is somewhere along the line going to be jumping there. Not now, because you'd be glad to give up the pair for glad to give up the bishop here to be able to get that pawn. So here, just knight to e5, throwing that knight in Hikaru's face, saying like, what are you going to do now? Rook a to e8, just developing all those pieces. We have f4 now, cementing that knight there, but just f6 pushing. Now you have to push it back. Here, just knight captures, queen to f3, and just queen to c7. So definitely you have to be a little bit careful here. Queen to s3, trying to threaten checkmate, and you have to be a little bit careful here. f5 was played, just closing this down completely. But with fi, you have to understand that you have made a committal decision now to close this file. Now you won't be able to push a central thrust, and with that in mind, you have to understand somewhere along the line you're going to have to jump in with the rooks to try and attack here fight somehow, because you need some counterplay to be able to, you need something to be able to push for, and that's exactly what something is in this position. You need to be able to get those rooks out somehow, and if you're able to get them out like that, maybe just another idea is pushing it, but that's just pushing it a bit too far against Magnus. That's definitely not something you won't want to do. So here, just g3, but now just comes rook to f6, rook to e2, and with rook to h6, immediately you might be able to just giving Magnus a bit too much, because there's queen to f1, and if you push b6 now to not let the knight jump in, I would just go rook d to e1, put some pressure on that weak backwards pawn, and somewhere along the line, even like sacrificing that is an option, and I don't have to worry about anything in this position. So here, after rook to e2, we have just a6, not allowing, just playing a waiting move. Rook d to e1, queen to d7. Now just you have to defend it, because now just captures, then most likely you'd be able to you just lose the rook. So here, just knight d2 and knight to d8, knight to f3. Now just going for this knight to f7, and here just king to h1. As long as that rook is there, I mean, you don't have to worry about such tactics, but still rook needs to move somewhere, and when that rook moves, those tactics become available, so you need to be careful for them. And obviously Hikaru is not going to forget about such things. Here's just g6 by Hikaru, and g6 is a move definitely I don't like, simply because of the fact that your position is absolutely closed. Now where are you going to be playing for in this position? Are you just saying to Magnus that maybe this position is as closed and maybe we can just go for a draw, or are you just saying to Magnus that I'll just defend whatever you throw at me, and yes, there are some knight jumps that you can go for, but my knight is defending very nicely, so I don't think so you have anything. But let's say if you go for knight to e5, hey, just queen to c7, and after rook to g1, it just looks very bad. I mean, it's an engine line, you have to understand. I mean, engines can hold this, but for humans, I don't think so that would be possible. But here, after bishop to f8, now this just plunders the game and gives Magnus a bit of an edge that he needed in this position, because now once you don't have your sights on the very nice f4 pawn, now I can actually push it and I can go g4 in this position. That's exactly what Magnus goes. Rook to h6 was played attacking the queen, but just queen to g3, and we have f captures, queen captures, and bishop to d6 now. But That little maneuver here did nothing, and now he knows it as well, Hikaru. But now you've given Magnus a bit too much, and he's going to capitalize on that, and he goes for f5. And now what do you do in this position? He just knight to d8, but now just comes f captures. Now you cannot even capture because there's tremendous pressure, and giving up the pawn maybe wasn't a good decision after all, because now you have to understand what do you do once c4 comes, and it's going to be a very hell of a thing there in this position. Here just knight to g5, and now there's trouble here. There's just immense trouble, immense pressure on all flanks, and you're just stuck defending all along. Rook to f8, bishop captures on h7, rook captures, knight captures, and king captures. So Magnus has given two pieces for the rook, but that rook either way was a bit too strong, because you can understand that rook has to defend every single time. But now with the h file being open, maybe you can have some attacking chances. Queen to h5 check was played in that spirit. King to g8, queen caps on d5, and now the pawn storm is definitely going to be coming, and there's not much ways you can actually try anything against that. Rook to f6 was tried, but now just comes this c4. And in this position, with a move like bishop to b4, you might still be holding, but with less time on the clock, with blitz like structure, it's just very difficult to find this move. This move is just insane. Here rook to g1, now you just go for knight caps on e6, and maybe after like c5, yes, your bishop is locked out, but you still have drawing chances. Yes, it looks very scary, but against Magnus, I mean, it's just very, very difficult to find out. But here after c4, we have rook to h6, and rook to h6 just completely blunders the game, because now just comes c5, and what are you doing in this position? Here just bishop to c7, queen to d7 was played. Now not trading queens, and if you had actually traded queens, then after e captures you played this very nice rook to h5, and rook to h5 basically stops all the pawn pushes. And even if you go for this check, then just comes king to f7. Even if you go for another check, the position would actually turn out into a draw, and you cannot sack here in this position and maybe just go for that rook there trying to just promote. It doesn't work out because the king is still there. So all in all, the position is very, very nice, and maybe you might have some holding chances here, but it's very, very unlikely against Magnus. If it was any other player, I might just give you some benefit of the doubt, but against Magnus, it's just very difficult. But here queen to d7, we have queen to f6, but now it just completely blunders the game, because here just you're giving a complete piece, and it's just a desperate attempt, because maybe just you're saying that maybe I'd be able to just hold you off to a perpetual, but that's not going to happen here. And knight captures on e6 was played, rook captures, and it was on this move, on just move 41, that Magnus Carlsen won this game spectacularly after Hikaru resigned it, and he played this amazing game. He continued to put pressure from the very beginning with the London system, and after he got a close position, he was the only one pushing. And when that one blunder came with the rook by Hikaru, Magnus capitalized on it. One pawn push, all he needed was one pawn push, that g4, once the bishop went back, and yeah, that was all he needed. And you couldn't capitalize with the rook, so your position just completely crumbled. Then the bishop part came in, and after everything, he got a position where sacrificing two pieces, and he understood that endgame was completely winning for him. So that you can understand with these genius players, that's all they need. They need just a little bit of push, just one tempo. All he needed was just one tempo in this position to be able to win the game, and he did it in absolute clutch against one of the best Title Tuesday players ever, that is Hikaru Nakamura. So yeah, definitely kudos to Magnus. So yeah, thank you all for watching. I'll be coming back with games like these, so stay tuned to the channel, stay updated, and I'll be seeing you guys very, very soon. Thank you very, very much for watching.